All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast powered by our friends over at X2 Power. And as always, I'm your host, Bailey Eichbrett, and joined with me is not the captain this week. Captain's taking a week off. It's his anniversary week. And so we are stuck with this guy, Mr. Drew Gregory, who I thought I got away from last week, but here we are once again, joined by the man. What's up, Drew?
Oh, not too much, man. Definitely a shout out to the captain, though. That guy's been holding it down, and
Yes.
he deserves a break. He does a great job. So happy to fill in for you, and hopefully I can just, I got big shoes to fill. So let's see if we can make it happen. We got a lot of stories. We're gonna have a lot of fun. So let's,
Yeah,
yeah.
we got the recent Hobie BOS champ on here who one honestly, these off the wall stuff like make me like nerd out. So I'm pretty excited to talk to Nolan, who won the recent Hobie BOS at the Susky, which was my first time ever being there, and that place was wicked cool. And I mentioned it on social media in a brief post, but like, dude, I was there for one day of practice. I mean, I guess like I practiced for 2 hours. Zach and I did like a small float on Friday, but between Thursday practice and then 2 days of competition, I was more whooped than I am like fishing for like a week and a half just for the way you have to fish that thing. And for somebody like yourself or like Nolan and his brother that grew up fishing that way, I give you guys mad props because I'm still toast right now. Like my body still
Oh
hurts.
yeah.
So I'm
Dude,
excited to
it's
learn how
yeah.
Nolan broke down that river, and also he's got some freaking juice that he's gonna lay on us here, which y'all are gonna be able to see in a YouTube video on his channel, which will be posted in here momentarily. He's gonna give us a thumbs up. But Drew, real fast, kind of give us before we bring Nolan on here, we got
Mhm.
him in the queue, patiently waiting. Tell us how your tournament went.
Yeah, man. I'll keep this brief because this is all about Nolan and his big win. So, but believe me, I know you and I could do a podcast alone without Nolan talking about everything that happened. We stayed in the same Airbnb. We had a blast. So last 2 years I fished the Hobie BOS in the Susquehanna. Um, I ended up third and fourth the last 2 years. So I've got some good history here. Always done well in the Susquehanna. And it kicked off my AOI run back in 2020. I went here and then just kind of went on a tear to go after the AOI, which I think Nolan and Ewing are both going to be in prime position for that this year. But I was excited about the tournament because of the history I've had there, and kind of knew what the fish typically do in a low water situation like this, and I know what they do in a little higher water situation like we had last year. So this was back to the low water, and my practice went great. I was catching 17, 18, 19-inch fish. And all I did during practice was fish totally new water. And here's why. Last couple of years, we've had about 115, 112 anglers in the tournament. This year, we capped out at 200. I think the final number ended up at like 192 because a few people dropped out. So my game plan was simply to find new fish and new water because I knew I would start at my history. And I didn't want to kind of beat those fish up. So basically, that's what I did. I wanted to find new fish. And I show up to my history spot, and there was only one other guy there, which is really cool. And he said, hey, do you want a coin flip for this really good hole that's right at the put in? And I just said, hey, you go ahead and take it, man. It's go ahead. No big deal. You just fish it, and I'll fish up there, and I'll hit some other the prime stuff up ahead of you because you'll be fishing that. I'm not going to mention his name and who he is, and he didn't do anything wrong per se, but man, it was kind of a little frustrating because he fished that hole, caught 2 18s, and then proceeded to fly up the river. I mean, fly to every juice spot in that area that he's fished before and kind of knows it too. And he had 90 1/4 inches, and I'm just like, can't even get up to, he's just going so fast. It's just that stuff. So he kind of raced me up there again. That's totally his prerogative. And he did it, and he just missed all the marginal stuff and went straight to the juice. So then I just paddled way ahead of him, and I tried to get to all of the good stuff that I had history wise up further upriver. And when I did that, there was people coming from other launches that were already there. There were 6 kayak anglers. There was 3 boats floating down fishing for smallmouth. And so long story short, I literally paddled upstream 2 miles, Bailey, just to go turn around and go back downstream because I couldn't get on anything. So I wasted half my day one. But here's the cool thing, man. I took it as a positive. I said, you know what? This is why I pre-fish new water. This is the exact reason why, in case, stuff hit the fan on day one, I've got a backup plan. It was very hard to do going up 2 miles and back, but I did that. I went to a secondary spot, got there about 10:30, paddled down river, and ended up finding a school of, it's kind of a float I'd done before, but not actually in pre-fishing really. And I found a school of 100 bass, man, 100 smallies, 75 to 100, I would say, that were suspended just under the surface in a very nondescript part of the middle of the river between the island. It wasn't the whole width of the river. And it was glass calm, bluebird skies, every perfect scenario, super low water for them to sip on insects and dragonflies. And every once in a while you see one jump up 2-3 feet in the air and try to grab one. And I didn't have any finesse stuff with me. I actually broke the only spinning rod I had during my transport, loading up from that first spot. So I had no finesse stuff, 30-pound braid. I was kind of doing my normal stuff, power fishing. And I still got those fish to bite, even with 30-pound braided line, with a Z-Man Power Finesse jig with the TRD crawls on the back. Caught, several nice ones out of that school, and then moved downstream to the spot that I really had good success in the past. Caught a couple more big ones, missed some big ones. Ended up with 91 inches. Never should have. I mean, in my mind, just crazy that I ended up with 91 after day one. Was sitting in 5th place. And to shorten the story up, on day 2, I went to one of the other new spots I pre-fished. Missed a few big fish early in the morning on a whopper plopper, real big ones, and caught one good one and couple other fish. And I was throwing back 12 and 13s like nothing, just throwing them back, not even measuring them. Even though I didn't have 5, I didn't care. I'd caught 40 fish the day before. And I knew I was going back to my school of 100 fish. And of course, I go back to that school. I do that second half of the day. I did the float with the 100 bass. And there's a guy sitting on the school in a canoe. Again, nice guy. He looked like Carl from Carl's Bait and Tackle with the hat and sitting in the canoe. He let me fish it with him, but he was literally on top of them. They were scattered. He caught a bunch of them. They spooked. And I could barely get 5 fish. And I thought I did not have 5 fish. If you guys watched the Instagram video I made, I said, man, I only ended up with 4 fish. I can't believe I was throwing back 12 and 13s. That's going to cost me a lot of AOY points and TOC potentially. And with 8 minutes to go, I was on the shuttle ride back with a couple guys from our house, Dustin and Matt. And I just was like, man, let me look back to my photos to make sure I didn't take a picture of one of those fish. And I had taken a picture of a 14 1/4 inch fish. And I didn't realize, I didn't remember I'd done it. And so I'm frantically trying to figure out how to, oh my gosh, which one do I have in Tourney X, which one do I not? And I got it in just in time. So I ended up with 5 fish and 77 inches to go with 91 to end up in 21st place, just outside of the money by 2 spots. So lessons learned. And sometimes, both days I had people kind of all over the stuff I wanted to fish. And that's one of the questions which we can, I'm sure, bring Nolan in, unless you got to tell your stuff first. But that's one of the questions I want to ask Nolan about. Is he's fished in the opens, and kayak fishing, it's so different because you'll paddle up 2 miles or to paddle downstream or wherever. You'll go a long way to get to some of your juice. And if somebody's there, man, does it change everything, because you can't just crank up and go 70 and move somewhere else. So it's, just, it didn't happen last year, and I got all the fish. Happened this year, and it cost me, but still a solid finish and a fun trip on the Susquehanna.
Yeah, you can't argue that. And
no,
we're going to bring Nolan in here because I have PTSD of my weekend. So we'll hold off on talking about my tournament, because this is the guy we want to talk to. Mr. Nolan Minor, who man of the weekend, looking lavish, looking stylish. That's the I don't even know what we want to call that right now. I think we'll let you describe what kind of fashion style you got going on with the hat. But
yeah, felt like
has the phone stopped, ringing yet?
Yeah, it's kind of starting to calm down. I like getting back to everybody, so I'm constantly like scrolling through, trying to find every last message, because I feel bad if I don't say something back to somebody. But yeah, people have been super cool as far as saying congrats, and it's kind of been cool to turn the heads of some guys that don't fish in kayaks, and they're like, dang, 10 grand, like it's
Dude, yeah.
For a $265 entry fee. That's the main thing too. It's that percentage.
Yeah. It's cool to see who's actually watching. They might see it in the public, but people got their eyes on it, and especially on you, dude. Like, we had you on a while back before the season even started, when we had our show. I mean, good grief, it was totally my fault, but it was like a 3-hour show. We were talking about the schedules for this year. And it was cool because we got you on there because you were switching from the opens to the Hobies, and you're going to take your stab at the kayak scene. And I'd say you're probably pretty happy that you've made that jump so far this year.
Yeah, this wasn't a bad year to do it either.
No.
I think the kayak scene was the place to be. But dude, really fast. I mean, we got you on. We talked a little bit about like your history in fishing and how you got your start. But I think one thing that was really cool that stood out to me, and I was Drew and I stayed at the same house together over the weekend. I told him, I was like, did you see all three minor boys were in the top 20 after day one? I thought that was super special for you guys. But I actually met your dad after day two, and he was talking about that. I was like, and you ended up saying it in your award speech that was his first ever like bass tournament, like something he's ever been in on. I thought like, this dude just a badass coming over here and trumping everybody. But dude, talk about the history. Like, how did you guys all get into like the river fishing stuff? Is that something your dad got you guys into? Like, where'd that all stem from?
Yeah, so like the first bass fishing I ever did when I was little, like really little, I want to say maybe 5, 6 years old. We would go to the Upper James River near Scottsville, Virginia. It's like right in the middle of the state, and that is so similar to the Susquehanna. Maybe a little more depth, but like just wide, pretty shallow, rocky bottom. You can always see the bottom. That's the best way I try to put it into perspective, is like you can always see the bottom. That really seems to be the best way to, explain to people how the river is. But yeah, and so my dad and my uncle, that's what they would always do. They would take their canoes out on the James and catch a bunch of smallmouth. And so for him, that is a very familiar fishing style. He's not much on fishing for the green ones like we do. And there's a lot more variables with those guys. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. But a river smallmouth, like if you know how to do it, it's pretty straightforward. So he wanted to go do that one because he enjoys doing that. And,
sounds like my kind of guy right there, man.
Yeah.
He doesn't throw glide baits for snakehead.
Yeah, no, he's not really doing that. We haven't quite got him on a bait caster yet, and I don't know that that's ever going to happen. But spinning rods, I had to get him dialed in with throwing a Chapo on a spinning rod, but it made it work. And he kind of turned me on to it on the last day of practice. I was like, dang, like I need to probably do that because he's doing pretty good.
Might hook into a big muskie on the James doing that, man. There's some big ones over there. I know that.
There were a bunch of them where I was fishing on the Susquehanna. I saw 5 the first day and 4 the second day.
Yep, they're definitely in there.
I didn't see a single one. I mean, not that I'm complaining. I respect a muskie, but I don't want to see one, to be honest.
I didn't this year, but I've definitely seen them in the past in the section I fished.
Great.
All right, so y'all want me to talk about this elephant in the room?
Yeah.
Sure,
spit it out for everybody. Spit it out.
All right, so my approach to this tournament was hoping that it was going to stay low water. Keep an eye on the stream flow, and it looked like we weren't. It's such a big river that there was no way for it to. We got to a certain point where it's like, even if we get rain, that river's staying low, which is what I wanted because. Yep. The fish are harder to catch when it's like that, which I think gives you a chance to set yourself apart. Because when the river's up and you can throw a jackhammer at the bank and they're going to be on a current seam, like a 20-inch fish is stupid when the water is high. As long as the bait gets in front of him, he's going to get caught. And I knew that would not be the case this time around. And I called up my buddy who guides on the New River in Virginia, like maybe a month before the tournament. I was like, hey, man, I just want to pick your brain about what you do in the summer when the water gets low, like what's the rundown? And he said, well, man, obviously top water, right? That's no surprise to me. I've caught tons of smallmouth in the summer on top water when the water's low. But he said, man, I don't know, maybe 80% of his fishing trips are spinning rod guys. And, they'll catch 40, 50 in a day easy. But the biggest fish out of, 5 trips, so, maybe they'll get an 18. But then he said, I'll take a fly rod group for one day and they'll catch 10 fish in the day, and 5 of them were 18 to 20 plus inch fish. And they, he was talking about how they eat bugs. They call them bug fish. So I was like, man, I know how to fly fish. So I was like, well, I'll just take a fly rod up there. And if I see that happening, I'll be able to, use a fly rod, even though it's kind of a, pain in the butt to do it. I was like, I'll try it because that'll be really outside the box. Well, then I got to looking online and I saw this little thing and I was like, man, that looks like something I could throw on a spinning rod and not have to have a fly rod in the boat and worry about peeling line off the reel when I see a fish that I want to throw to.
Even better.
So I ordered some, and my dad and I, the weekend before the tournament, we drove to a local river that has big smallmouth, and I took this thing to go experiment, and we found some fish in a pool that they were just there because there was no water anywhere else. And they were very skittish. Those are always hard fish to catch when you can see them and there's almost no current. If it's a big smallmouth, it's very hard to get that fish to bite. And I started throwing this bug at them And they would, as long as they didn't see you throw that thing out in front of them, they just cruise right up to it. They nose up on it, you give it a little twitch. And I was catching 18, 19 plus inch smallmouth very easily. And I was like, this is, something that I need to take up there.
This is so calculated, dude. I love this, Nolan. This is like so calculated. You're like doing it, testing it before the tournament, even like knowing you're going to find this.
Because I'd never done it, so I was like, I need to try to get some experience doing it. And then I looked at the map of the river and I looked for areas that were very slow and calm.
Yep.
Because most of the river, if you look at it, it's all riffles. So I looked for areas that didn't have any of that, because there's still going to be fish there, especially when the water's low. That's where they're going to retreat to. And so my first day of practice, I was just going to go there and see what was there. And the sun was out, saw a bunch of fish, and it got to the point where once that sun got up and it was later in the day, those fish started kind of cruising around. That's what my buddy refers to as bug fish. It's literally a mood. It's a mood that they enter later in the day when that sun gets out. They're literally cruising around trying to eat bugs that are on the surface. And you'll see them. He'll be jet black usually. A lot of times he's by himself. Sometimes it'll be a wolf pack, and they'll just be cruising in very calm water. And you can throw a little wacky rig or a Ned rig at those fish and catch them. But there's a lot of times those fish, when it hits the water, they'll like spook, or they'll go look at it and they'll shy away from it because they're smart fish. They've been caught before. Right. But if you throw this thing at them, they just eat it. Like, it's so cool. And what Bailey was talking about, how he was like nerding out on new techniques. Like, that's why I can't keep this thing to myself, because it's so freaking cool that like it's something new that you haven't heard about. I mean, some guys know about it, but it's, I always sit there and wonder, like, oh, we know everything about bass. Like, there's all these different baits. We have everything. What's going to, and then all of a sudden some new bait, somebody starts doing something and it's really effective. And that feels like what this is. I'm not claiming to be the first to have done it, but it's not something that's widely known.
You can claim it. We'll allow it.
I want to make one and put my name on it, honestly. So if anybody is watching that wants to do that, I'm working on some stuff, but we'll see what happens.
Oh, okay.
Here he is. I'll show y'all. So it's made out of elastomer. Evergreen makes it. It's called the Gizmo. And he's got some little legs that move around a lot. There's a little weed guard on there. I don't think it actually does anything. I was cutting it off some of the time. The hook's pretty good, but it's kind of light. It bends out, and I would like one that would have a stronger hook to it. And you could make one that could cast better than this too. It does okay. I think their site says like 7/64 of an ounce. So it's like if you tied 7 trout magnets together and cast it, that's what it is. It flies pretty good though. It doesn't spin, but yeah, I mean, I thought it had a really solid hookup ratio. And then Ewing and I both on the last day, we're like calling each other back and forth the whole time. And he's like, man, I just lost 3 big ones in 3 casts. I was like, me too, dude. I don't know what's going on. So clearly there's still some tweaking that needs to be done to figure it out. But it's so new to me that I don't know any better. And it's just kind of, but they were biting so well that it didn't matter that we were losing some fish. It's kind of crazy to be in that situation where you're losing 18-inch fish and you're like, I'll just throw it the next one, like whatever. But yeah.
Is it a topwater bait? Or
it floats. Sorry, if anybody didn't know that. Yeah, it floats. So literally you throw that thing out there, and what my buddy Ethan, the guide on the New River, what he calls it with their fly rod stuff, they call it the sploop when it lands. And like you got to make it sploop near them because they have to hear it hit, because that like triggers them. Like they're very dialed in. Like it's amazing how far the smallmouth can sense it from. Like you can land it 10 feet out in front of one and he just boom, beeline right to it. He knows, like he's eaten bugs before. He knows what's up. And so you were talking about the dragonflies. I know that they're eating dragonflies, but my buddy on the New, he said that usually the bug bite does not get good until it's hot in the summer and you can hear the cicadas in the trees. These are just the annual cicadas. It's not the crazy 17 madness hatch. But he said when you can hear those cicadas in the trees loud and it's really hot out, that's when it shines. And you can watch all the clips in my YouTube video. They're freaking droning. You can hear them so loud. And actually the first morning of the tournament, while I'm catching them on a Chapo, I like look down at my feet and there's a big cicada that's half dead floating down the river. And I'm like, oh, these fish are in trouble, you know? And I ended up seeing another one later in the tournament, also floating on the water, half dead. And that's something I've never even really seen that before. I've always kind of wondered because you don't see those annual cicadas very often, but clearly the smallmouth do. And I'm kind of wondering if it's just they get eaten so quickly that we never have time to see them floating on the surface. My buddy on the New, he's had some coughing up cicadas this year. So they clearly eat them, even though it seems like you never see them that often. You hear them, but you don't really see them around.
I'd seen some at the house, Drew. I didn't have the brain knowledge to say, hey, maybe I should mimic that. No, it was. I thought river smallmouth was so stupid they'll eat whatever you put in their face, but Nolan's like, y'all are not that smart.
No, yeah, I mean, no, Bailey, you're right. I mean, most of the time they will, and obviously a lot of people did really well in this tournament with the typical stuff. You know what I mean? And the spinner baits and chatter baits and choppos. But here's the deal: it's what Nolan said. To win every tournament you ever see won, whether it's Elite Series, MLF, doesn't matter, man, what it is. Almost every time somebody is doing something a little like just outside the box, it's a little bit crazy, and they just found something so special. And a special spot is exactly what Nolan said. He could even afford to miss some fish and still win this tournament. And that's a real winning spot. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're always going to miss some fish, but let's say somebody probably, I'm sure, finished right below him that just fished totally clean, and they still couldn't catch what Nolan caught. You know what I'm saying? Because he just had it was so dialed in. But to what you were saying about this insect thing, I actually knew they did this as well, because a friend of mine, similar to you, Nolan, he guides for smallmouth in Indiana on a creek there that's actually, you catch like 21, 22, even I know of 23s that'll come out of it. And it gets real low in the summer, like you're saying. And he said, one time he told me, he said, Drew, I would love for you to come over and just witness, and not even fish, just float and just watch the smallmouth eat bugs in the lowest of low waters in the summer. Just watch them sip them in, just kind of like a trout, just go over there and just nip them in. And you would never imagine a giant smallmouth would do that. And so I'd never seen it really like I did this year, because it was lower this year than it was 2 years ago when we were there. And I was kind of doing pretty well on, moving baits that year. But I noticed it in the middle of the river when I moved from that first spot. You probably heard that a little bit of the story I was telling about my day when I saw them suspended, and there was this huge pack of them, and I saw that, and they were near the surface. Like you said, they look real dark. They're just like these logs just sitting there. And if you ever fish saltwater, it's like a barracuda or something, just kind of sitting near the surface. They were all there, kind of pointing different directions. And it clicked to me the same way it clicked to you. Of course, I didn't have any preconceived knowledge or thinking about this to go get any baits that look like that to mimic that, because I'd never seen that there before. And obviously I go back to the Airbnb, Bailey, and I said, dude, they're eating bugs. And I found them, and I said, I was like, who's got wacky rig hooks and stuff? I didn't even have anything like finessey and whatever, but it was pretty cool, because when you said something, Nolan, on the awards when we were watching it, I told Bailey, I said, dude, they're eating bugs, man. He found them eating bugs the same way I did. The only difference is it sounds like were you floating, or were y'all waiting more? Were most years singles or a couple together, or did you ever see a giant school like I found doing that?
I definitely never saw a giant school. There would be a pool that maybe a quarter mile long that had a lot of fish in it, but typically they were not really grouped up. They were singles or pairs, and they'd be moving. Like the ones that bit the best would be covering some ground, like they're cruising down the shoreline looking for something. They would hold on a boulder or on a log, but the problem with those fish, there were some other fishermen around, and the fish that were living on the logs and the boulders, they got fished for. Yeah. So they would often come and look at this thing and then be like, they'd nose up on it and they wouldn't commit to it. But if you threw a wacky rig at those fish, they would run. So this is still, I was getting a better response from skittish fish on the bug. Cool. But yeah, so what I was doing, I started at the bottom end of all the water I was fishing, and I would just work my way upriver the whole time, because then
your waves
you could definitely do well floating on these fish, but it was so skinny in some of the places that these fish would get that it's really hard to fish towards those fish. You sight fishing them, you could do it, but it's way easier when you're going facing toward their tails, because if you see one, you can just stop and the current's going to kind of slow you down. Whereas if you're drifting up on him and you spot his nose, you're like, you got to make stuff happen really quick. You don't have any time to readjust. Right.
So were you pedaling then or paddling? Because obviously you're going to get better sight standing. Plus, you're probably 6 foot something like.
So I caught maybe a couple of them standing, but for the most part, I was either waiting with the kayak, like I had a rope and I would just drape it across my shoulders, so it was tethered to me. And that was when the fish. It's on the video from day 2. My topwater stretch, they got kind of skittish because I beat them up the day before. I really didn't. I mean, I caught them well, but I only made one pass through it the first day. It's like a 1/4 mile stretch that I literally just walked and like fan casted my way up the river. But when I came through it on the second day, I caught some, but they were small. But I would still see the nice ones like waking, like either spooking off of me wading through, or they would come rush up to the bait and stop. And so I made a second pass through there when it was still low light and I couldn't see. And I'm walking my way up towards these. There was like one spot that had a small concentration of them. It had a bunch the day before, like probably a dozen, and it was freaking this deep. But then the second day when I came up to it, it still had a few. I caught a small one, but the other wakes looked like nice fish. So when I doubled back through there, as I'm getting up on it, I was trying to decide what I was going to throw because the Chapo pretty much got the biggest fish to react. I tried some other stuff. A fluke, it was like it didn't make enough noise or something to get their attention. Like you could catch some small ones on it, but it just wasn't quite right. I had a silent walking bait. I was using some. I caught some on that, but again, they still weren't that nice. But as I'm easing up on this little rock where these fish were sitting, I'm like, man, I guess I'm going to throw the silent walking bait because I already threw the Chapo and they kind of didn't like it. But as I'm getting close, I see one's tail stick up out of the water like a redfish. And it was because he was in such shallow water that when he went down to eat a crawfish, his tail came out of the water. And I'm like, I'm grabbing the bug right now. So I literally turn around, like set the walking bait down, pick the bug up and fire it right to where that fish's tail was. And he goes, and it was a 17 3/4. I caught that one, measure him, unhook him. And then I go back up and then I just make a long cast out in front of the little riffle that the rock makes. And it lands, boom, 18.5 inch eats it. And these aren't fish that I can see. I just know where they're at. And from that point on, I was like, well, I'm done throwing the top water. So I just kept making my same route up the river, but I was just splooping the bug all over the place, throwing it out there. And, just randomly you'd throw it out there somewhere and they can hear it from so far away. It's surprising how much water you can cover with it, even though pretty much your bite only happens right when it lands. I mean, it could be within 5 feet of him and he's like, oh, there it is. He swims over to it and eats it. And you'd see him coming, they'd wake to it.
I got to say, I think sploop has become my new favorite word.
I love it.
I've never heard it.
Ethan Stone and Britt. Britt is
they get the credit.
Britt's probably not happy that I'm talking about this, but it's okay. Britt's moving to South Carolina. So
lost some friendships.
Yeah, there's no doubt, man. What you're saying, like when it landed, the fish that were aggressive and feeding, when it landed, if you got it the right distance away, it couldn't be too far, but also couldn't be right on them. They would spook because they were so shallow. And you could fish for them like redfish. And pre-fishing, I did that a lot. You would see whether it was a catfish or a carp or bait fish or the smallmouth itself, it didn't matter. If you saw anything, you need to throw 10 feet in front of it. And then when that happens, a lot of times, I don't know if you saw this, but a lot of the bigger smallmouth will roam with the catfish. I don't know if you saw that, Nolan, or not, but the carp, the carp as well. So carp and catfish, they'll roam with those. So when you see any activity like that, it's not like saltwater fishing. If you see that activity, a lot of times it's like, you don't need to be throwing at everything because there's mullet and just tons of stuff just everywhere. But in a river like this, it's crazy because it's either, bait or carp or catfish or smallmouth, and the smallmouth could be with the carp or the catfish, or they could be next to the bait. So it's like, man, you might as well go for it. But make sure your cast is 10 feet in front. And I was shocked. Well, not really shocked because I'd seen it before, but people will be shocked at how shallow big smallmouth will get. If they got somewhere to hide, and sometimes it's not even somewhere to hide. It's like in those shallow gravel bars on the head of islands or something, and you float right up on it. Next thing you know, it swims away and you're like, dang it, dude, I could have just thrown there. That was a smallmouth and 6-7 inches of water. Are you kidding me? It's insane how shallow they'll get. So
yeah, it definitely, I think, paid off too for some folks that like, as long as you're drifting, you should be casting if you can manage to, because they were so random. But I mean, that's another point we can get to in a second. But real quick, Nolan, we have JP Harrell asking, that's a light bait. And I know you mentioned you still have more, dialing in for this bait to kind of work with it. But, what gear were you throwing this bait on?
Yeah, so I was using Abu Garcia Zeta 30 size spinning reel with 10-pound X9 braid, Berkeley X9 braid on it, to an 8-pound good old Berkeley Trilene mono leader, because fluorocarbon sinks and it makes the bug kind of dive down, and you need it to stay right up on top. So when you twitch it, it gives it a nice little pop instead of trying to dive. I was throwing it on a medium light. I think it's like a 7 or a 7.2 winch, Abu Garcia winch rod. And that's because I was talking about the hook is pretty light on this thing. It's a pretty light wire hook. It's very sharp, but you can't put a whole lot of pressure on the fish. And well, you could, and you would land one, but then your hook's kind of bent. Like, I don't have a million of these things, and you certainly aren't just going to run down the road and pick up one from a tackle shop. So I had to be kind of careful with what I was doing. Like, Ewing had 2 for the whole tournament, and I was like, "Look, man, you just got to make it work."
Do you have like a hook sharpener, or that? Do you have a hook sharpener at all?
No, the hook stayed pretty sharp. It wasn't really that. It was just that they start to kind of bend out, when you catch it. I mean, because smallmouth are strong. Those river smallmouth, they're very strong. And sometimes the hook wouldn't penetrate all the way. That's when it, kind of folds it out when it's putting all the pressure right on the end of the hook.
Gotcha. Okay. Same guy here is asking, how are you fishing that after it hits the water? Are you just dead sticking that sucker, or are you giving it like line slacks? What are you doing?
So what I would do, I would throw it out in front of them. And usually when it would land, it would get their attention. You would notice the fish would react, realizing that it's there. He swims over to it, and usually they nose right up on it. And then you give it one little tiny twitch, just any little movement. That's what makes them finally decide, like, bam, I'm going to eat it. But sometimes they'd get under it, and you twitch it once, and then he just like gets on it a little more, and you give it one more twitch, and he gets on it a little more, and maybe one more twitch, and he would eat it. Typically, though, they were going to get it right on the first one. Once you have to start moving it more, even if they're still interested, your odds of getting that fish to bite are starting to go down. If he's going to commit, it's pretty much going to be right away. And the best ones were the ones that you didn't have time to twitch it. Like, it lands, you try to close your bail, and he's already in the – it's amazing. Some of them will come completely out of the water to eat this stupid little bug, like a 19-inch fish, reaching to eat it. Like, that's another thing I was talking about with my buddy Ethan. I was like, man, how is a bug that – like, how is it worth that effort to these fish? I don't understand if it's somehow it tastes good to them, or it's more protein than a crayfish, which I can't really figure that part out either, because there's so many crayfish in the river at the Susquehanna. Right. Like, are they just sick of eating crayfish? Are they tired of it and they want to eat something new? Or is it, because it makes no sense for me with all that food in there that they're like, I'm going to wait for that one little bug. And when I see him, I'm going to eat that thing. Like,
I've got a theory on that, Nolan. I was actually going to bring this topic up. I have a theory on that. So, man, like, all animals, including us, whatever, we all have a lot of similarities just because we're animals. I don't know how to say this, but sometimes you have a craving for something, and sometimes you have a craving for something different, and your body knows, like, you need this or that. And I don't think smallmouth necessarily say, like, oh my God, like, I'm so tired of crawfish. You know what I mean? But in a way, like, their instincts, their bodies may kind of say something like that, if that makes sense, because they can't eat bugs. There's only one time a year they can ever do that. The river has to get super low, bluebird skies, no wind, and the bugs have to be out, and that's the summer. And I just think that their bodies know they either need that, or they do get sort of, for a better way to say it, they get tired of crawfish. You know what I mean? I'm sure they do a little bit. It's just something unique and different. Or maybe in a weird way that it's fun to them too, because those fish have a chance to eat anything, like you're saying. And maybe it's just, it sounds so stupid, I know, and someone's gonna be like, man, I don't think fish think like that, but it's something like that could be very well possible, because there's certain times a year they continue to switch from crawfish to these insects to bait fish. You know what I mean? They key on different things. And a lot of times in most rivers, it's because where they spawn in the pre-spawn, they deplete a lot of, bait fish in that area or whatever, or crawfish or hellgrammites. And then where they winter, those fish haven't been touched, or those prey haven't been eaten as much. So they kind of get replenished. They go there, and it's kind of like the land of milk and honey again for them. They kind of keep doing that whole cycle. But anyway, you have a thought on that theory, if that could be very well possible?
Real quick, before we continue, I want to go ahead and tell everybody, I know we're all going to go look out and buy this bait. Can we please wait until my buddies at Fishing Online get them in stock? They already ordered them. I was like, guys, you need to get more of these baits. Like, people, we're gonna be buying them. So if we can maybe, like, in honor of me giving up all this secret and really like talking about it, just try to, all the people that are watching right now, like, just please get them from Fishing Online. Like, maybe get a couple from somewhere else, but if you want to buy like half a dozen of them or whatever, like, please go to Fishing Online and get them from there. That would mean a lot to me, because I want us all to catch fish, but I'm giving this up. So, like, please just do something for me in return.
Dude, I don't know if I could give this up.
I definitely didn't just text the boys at Omnia and say to get some stuff. No, I'm just kidding. But for real, like, when that goes down, make sure you guys are checking out Nolan's video. So I'm going to drop the link down here, the video is up. His channel link is in the description, whether you're listening or you're watching. Make sure you're subscribed to this dude, because not only is he unleashing some damn juice, fire tournament videos, fire saltwater stuff, like he does it all. So that's one thing we're going to talk about a little bit here, but also follow him on social, because you'll get all the links to all the juice, because Nolan obviously has the knowledge here, which Nolan, carry on. I am going to drop the link down for you here.
Someone asked, it's an evergreen gizmo. Somebody just came in late. That's what the bait's called, evergreen gizmo. Every time I hear and like read the name of it, I just think of Mike Iaconelli going like gizmo, like in his very advertising voice. Like that's all I can think of, because that would be something that he would totally run with. But yeah, it's a goofy little bait, and I accidentally uploaded one of my fish. I think y'all talked about it on the first day, and the bait was in the picture, which I was like, oh crap. But then I'm like, people probably think I'm messing with him. Like people would look at that and be like, nah, that's not. He's just having fun with it at this point. So I really wasn't that worried about it at that point. Yeah. Also, I knew nobody could get him, so they wouldn't be able to get him in time.
Did you try? I'm just curious. Did you try either like a small hair jig or something like that, or did you try? And this is crazy, but I'm wondering if somebody drop shotted a fly, you know what I mean? Like, I guess in the deeper water situations, like my fish were in like 2.5, 3 foot of water. I wonder if you could drop shot a fly on those fish and sit there and shake it, and it would work just as good.
Not a pattern.
I'm friends with Mr. Oliver Nye, and he was talking about drop shotting a fly up north. I don't know if he wants me saying that or not, but he definitely was doing that. I don't know. For me, so I have a buddy who grew up on the Susquehanna. His name is Garrett Enders. He fished at Bethel University in college. Super good dude. He doesn't live in Pennsylvania anymore, but I talked to him about the river before I went also. And he was telling me, he was like, I was hoping that he was going to describe the bug thing, because when I talked to him, I had already talked to my buddy Ethan. And I was just wondering, because, Ethan was like, well, it might not be the same on the Susquehanna because it's further north and whatever. And I talked to Garrett, and the first thing this man says to me on the phone, he's like, this is going to sound really weird, but these fish, they really relate to bugs. And I'm like, oh, dude, I'm way ahead of you. Like, this is what I needed to hear. But what he said that a lot of locals will do is they'll do what I did with this, but they use poppers. And I'm just scared to death of catching a smallmouth on a treble hook. So since this bait has one hook, I was a much bigger fan of doing that. But I'm sure that a small black popper would do well too. But in a tournament, you do not want to be throwing treble hooks if you have the option to throw a single hook, especially if it's a fish that's in this much water, because there's only one way to go, and it's up. And he's going to continue to go up and up and up. And you just, it doesn't end well a lot of the time with treble hooks.
Yeah. I threw a black hair jig a bit too. I caught some fish on that. The only problem was
good ones on it.
I caught an 18. Caught an 18 on it on day one, but beyond that, it was just like, it's one of those deals where you have such a small window, because like once that thing gets in the current, I mean, like good luck. You're not going to be able to either catch up to it, one, or two, be able to. I don't know. I think it's just hard. You got to get in the pools, and granted, I'm not Drew, or I'm pointing this way. I'm not Drew or this guy right here. So like these small current fisheries for me are interesting, where I just relied on a spinnerbait, and I should have switched to the spinnerbait. And this is actually one thing I wanted to bring up with you guys. I've already complained to Nolan extensively about this and have talked through on solutions I should have taken. But I got my heart broken several times, both days on top, and switched to the spinnerbait. And I feel like I should have made that switch much earlier, but it was predominantly spinnerbait and a little bit of hair jig if the situation was right. But this is one thing that Nolan and I were talking about actually earlier today. So I made the switch. I was throwing a Chapo 75, which Nolan, you were throwing 75 version of same plopper style top water.
Yeah, it's just because the supply chain screwed up, and so I couldn't get the right color. But I don't like the other one as much, but it was what I had to do. Sometimes you just got to do it.
And you switched up to a treble hook that we both agree is makes a difference. Do you care if I unleash that at all?
You can talk about it.
Yeah. So we switched to Ichikawa hooks, which I think definitely make a difference. But I was still having the issue. I even double split ringed the back hook. And Drew, I'm actually curious your take on this too, being that you guys are both river nuts. But even I went from owner STX to Ichikawa's, and I was still having the problem. I was losing fish on top water. And the one conclusion I came up with, and Nolan thought he could see this happening as well, was when Nolan was catching his fish on top, he was mostly wade fishing. Therefore, you're not moving, and you're able to somewhat get a little bit more leverage. Whereas if you're in the kayak floating downriver, catching them on top with those fish, you can kind of lose leverage a little bit easier or not get as much of a pinned hook set. What are your guys' takes on top water in the river, if that has anything to do with it versus being stationary versus being moving?
I guess I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was fishing upstream. So I'm standing, I'm in a fixed position when I hook these fish. But even when you're standing there, when these fish are in, a foot of water and you're reeling that thing, I mean, you're moving it fast. When they eat it, they're coming at you so fast that I don't care who you are, they're going to put slack in your line sometimes. Like there's times when one eats it and you're like, set the hook and you're like, where the heck is my bait? And you're just cranking and the fish is coming at you. So if you're going downstream towards him and he does that, like you're going towards him and he's going towards you, that leaves a lot of room for error. Not that you really have a choice, but yeah, definitely could play into that. I fished a Bassmaster Open on the St. Lawrence last year, and I really had some bad experiences with treble hooks and smallmouth in shallow water because I have always used a round bend style hook that's just a razor sharp light wire. Don't really care who makes it, but that style hook, and just lean into them with treble hooks. That's always been my theory. Well, my smallmouth in Virginia, their mouths are built differently than the ones further up north. Like once you get up, the Susquehanna fish were like this, but also the St. Lawrence fish, they have like a really thick lip, and their heads are smaller because they grow slower. So our fish in the South have bigger heads comparatively. And so you really just have to completely rethink the whole treble hook theory. But what happened to me at the St. Lawrence is I didn't know any better. So I was using those round bend hooks and I was losing fish, jerk bait, spy bait, losing them. And what I realized and what I know now is that I should have changed to an EWG style hook and just hit him hard, because like if you're going to get him, just hook him hard, with the EWG style hook, because that holds on to him a little better. You may not hook every fish that bites, but the ones that you do hook, and if you set that hook harder, it's a lot harder for them to throw it when they get that EWG style hook in them. So that's why I was using the hooks that I wore. And that's why I'm kind of afraid of round bends on smallmouth in warm, shallow water, because they're going to jump, and you just need something that's going to dig in there and really hold on to them. That's my theory with it.
That's good stuff.
Drew, anything to add?
Yeah, sure, man. This is going to be a great episode, man, because we got a lot of juice here, and I'll give some tips on this. So one, if you're moving downstream and you're throwing straight ahead of your boat, okay, when you're usually fishing a lot of top water, you're covering water, you're going fast. So therefore, if you're in a Hobie or something like that, you're pedaling in a paddle boat like myself, you're paddling fast. One thing you want to do, it's why I use straight braid on all this stuff. I know people say their braid gets caught sometimes in their hooks or whatever on these baits. I never have that problem. When you're slowing your bait down with your bait caster with your thumb, the way you do it properly, it just never seems to like have enough slack to get tangled up. So I don't have that problem. So I don't know if you guys ever have that or don't, but I just throw straight braid like 40 or 50 pound on a top water like this. But if you're going fast, right, if you're casting forward, that's creating slack in your line as you're moving. It'd be like a trolling motor on high fishing, on a bass boat. The difference with a bass boat is you can literally walk back, and step back and really continue to hammer them by walking back on the deck to get that leverage needed. On a kayak, you can't, and you're creating slack. So what I do is before I make a cast with the top water, if it's directly in front of me and I'm moving that way, I make a couple back paddle strokes and slow myself down. It's like it's second nature. I don't even think about it. I do it a couple times. I'm slowed down to almost a stop. I bring that bait in. Usually, like Nolan said, they're going to hit it in the first quarter of the cast when it's that shallow. And so I rip it back in, move forward till, almost to where that cast landed almost, and then throw it again, do it again. But anyway, the other thing you can do on a top water, like if you're throwing to the side, by the way, 90 degrees to the side, it's not as big of a deal. But the main thing you got to remember, guys, is on a top water bait, like a Chapo or Plopper or whatever, I find it better if you're, when you see them coming or whatever, or your rod tip is down and kind of pull down with it, never like pull up. That's kind of getting the bait up and out of the water, and there's no friction because there's air above the bait, right? There's no water. So you want to kind of pull down and into the fish. And that's kind of one thing. It's a sweeping motion down and into the fish. And I talked to some of the guys at the house about this. So that's one of the main things I would mention. The other thing is when you get a fish hooked with a topwater, like a treble hook bait, like you're saying, plopper or chapo, like I watch a video when I won the Bassmaster Lewis Smith Lake. I caught a 19.25-inch largemouth. I think it was 19.25, and I'm fighting it, and it's clear water, and you see it's got that one little hook, that back hook in its side of its mouth. The other thing you want to do on any topwater bait like this with multiple treble hooks is whenever they make a run one direction, this really helps too, because I'm using like a 7'6" rod, the longer rod for longer casts. It helps in this situation too. And I said in the video, man, I really want to get a second hook in this fish. So you want to do is bend it back as fast as you can, whip it back on them, and the bait gets back against the fish's body, and you can get that second hook usually on the underside of their belly. So try to get that second hook in if you can, and that'll help you keep some of those ones that just get that single hook in the back hooked up. So
is that like a low-key Mike Long type
snagging?
of
Low key, but at least I already had them traditionally first, and then I was just kind of,
security.
Yeah, security.
Right.
Just working a little bit more, but you can definitely do that. You just have to be able to see in clear water and understand that you've got that one hook like that. And a lot of times they'll jump and you'll see it, and you're like, oh crap, I got to turn this fish a couple times and hoping, pray to the river gods that it gets another hook in.
Yeah, I mean, I think from that situation, what it was for me, and it really was kind of the biggest example of a tinkering necessity, I guess. Like, it was a big issue in terms of gear and just more of how I was approaching those fish that I have ever run into. Like, it was extremely difficult. And while during the tournament, it was extremely frustrating. I mean, the drive home and also like yesterday, even like into today, like I'm still thinking about it. I'm probably going to think about it for a while, but like I'm excited about it now because like that's something, a challenge I haven't really run into, because typically you'll land some fish if your equation is not fully to where it should be. But this one, it was like, if you didn't have it right, I mean, it was like you're running the lottery if you're getting them in the boat the way I was approaching it. And after talks with you, Drew, and you, Nolan, I think I have a better approach for next time in terms of just straight up how you approach the cast. 'Cause I think boat positioning, where you're directing the cast has a lot to do with this versus just the tackle you're using. But I don't know, this whole thing was pretty exciting for me. And obviously not losing fish, but I think the fact that this is a big learning lesson, I think was really cool. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
And in stride with that, it leads me to Nolan, going into this event. I mean, do you think your spot was like a very special? I mean, I don't expect you to talk about names, areas, or whatever. I don't want to like let go of that. But your area, was it something that you think was special, or do you think your technique did the heavy lifting? Like, what did you think about practice, and what did you look for in practice to kind of try to give you an edge on tournament days?
I mean, probably a little bit of both. I know it's easy to say this. I feel pretty confident that I probably could have cracked the top 10 if I really committed to any stretch of the river and found the right, because I think fish acting like that were kind of everywhere. But I just wanted to be somewhere that had a lot of it going on. The area, for one, it was harder for people to get into there to access it. You had to either go upriver or do some dragging. You couldn't just float right into that place. So I knew that would discourage some people, especially just during practice, because there's a lot of people that were probably fishing stretches of the river, never intending to go there during the tournament, but just to try to kind of pattern their fish. And so all those fish were getting pressure, but I knew that the fish in my area, even if people went in there, they weren't going to be pressuring them as much, just because there would be less people in there. Also, since it's calm water, those fish are smart. So a lot of the time, if there's fishermen in there, I don't really think they're catching them. That's how I felt in the tournament, because there'd be guys around me. By the second day, I wasn't trying to hide anything. I'm just trying to burn it to the ground, catch as many as I can. And there would be guys within like low voice talking distance of me, which is fine because we're all fishing. It's not a huge river in certain places. So when we're passing by each other, it just is what it is. I'm not, upset with anybody. But I mean, we'd be very close to each other, and I'd see one, flick the bait out there, bam, bust that one, unhook it. Oh, it's only 17 and a half, throw it back. Okay, here's another one, bam, catch that one. And the guys are just sitting there not catching anything. And that's, I mean, you have to be kind of confident and in your head go like, when you're around people, you got to think like, I'm better than these guys. I'm going to catch the fish that they're not catching. Because if you don't think that way, if you're thinking like, oh, he's catching my fish, it's not going to go well for you. Because
Right.
somebody's always got to catch them. If there's a community hole or an area that's being used by several anglers, somebody's going to catch the fish. It's easier to get, the short end of the stick when you're around other people having to share fish, but there is somebody that's always going to have to come out on top. So a lot of that is your mental approach to that.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with Dave Chappelle at all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Nolan, are you?
Yeah.
When you were describing, you told it here, but you also told me on the phone how you had a bunch of people around you and they were like just watching you catch fish and you didn't care if they were around because you were obviously doing something so unique. Well, there's the scene of Dave Chappelle where he did the thing where he's like, "Gotcha, bitch!" Like every time, I don't know why that was like popping in my head. When you're describing that, where you just like didn't care if they're there and they're like trying to fish around you, and you're like, "Nah."
Yeah, I mean, if it, I don't know, maybe if it was like somebody that I knew was like in second place or whatever, I'd be like, "Hey, man, can we work out to where like I'll take this side of the river, you take that side?" But
Right.
Without trying to be too rude, if I looked at somebody and it didn't really seem like they were probably going to be catching my fish, I was just like, whatever. I'm not going to tell this guy to back off because then he's going to be like, oh, that Nolan guy thinks he owns the whole river. He kept telling me to leave. So I'm like, I'm just going to catch fish right in front of him. So
it definitely depends on you. You have to like game can kind of like tell game, you know what I mean? Like, and you can tell if an angler is, a real threat or not. And, I'll give credit to the guy in my story. He was a real stick and he ended up, I'm not going to say what place he was. I mean, I didn't say anything bad about him. He didn't do anything wrong, but he raced and knew where all the juice was and anyway, and hit it. But, before I could get there, but he knew what he was doing. And so I was kind of like, I can't just sit there and go right past him. Otherwise, I want to get way upstream and get separated. And then of course I saw people catching fish all my other spots, and I could either wait for those fish to reset or the ones that caught probably aren't going to bite again that day. So you definitely have to assess, like you're saying, the people around you, if they're really, able to catch a threat. And usually I can tell I can watch you cast one time and tell if you're a threat. That's all it takes me is to see you cast once or twice. And then you guys know what I'm saying. Like you can just tell, man. Like if you bass fish long enough, like this guy,
right?
He's a threat.
Well, I mean, that's a good. Sorry, go ahead, Nolan.
I was gonna say, so where I was sight fishing my fish, had I tried to go there in the morning, there was too many people there. I could literally see, and I knew people were going to be there because in practice, if you floated through there, you would see the fish. It's not like they're hiding. It's not like those fish were hidden from anybody or they're hiding up under a rock. Like they're just swimming around in 2 feet to maybe 4 feet of water. I knew people were going to know they were there. So I fished. I had some topwater shallower stuff like I was talking about early. That's where I would fish, and I could see very distantly up the river where my sight fishing stuff was, and there were kayaks all over the place first thing in the morning, and they'd be working towards me, but I would just keep an eye on them. As long as they weren't coming down into my topwater stuff, I really wasn't worried about it. And then once the sun would get up, I'm sure the fish up there, maybe they were catching some early in the morning, but in the calm water, they're very spread out. So it's not very efficient to try to catch those on the chopo type bite, So once the sun got up, those guys would kind of, I guess, lose confidence because the bite was probably slowing down up there. And I knew that at that point I could go up there and they would be clearing out.
Right.
They'd probably go to the stuff I had already hit. And I did that both days. It worked out really well.
Yep. And that's exactly why I went and killed about 3 hours in the morning at a different spot, top water, all that, a different spot. And I knew my fish in the middle of the river, nondescript area, like no one was there the day before when I found them. I mean, I have those fish all to myself come, 10, 30, 11, when that's the time the sun's getting up, clear water, like no wind. That's the time those fish are kind of doing that. And sometimes you gamble and you lose. And I lost with Carl from Carl's Bait and Tackle in the canoe, sitting there right on top of him. I was like, I can't believe, dude. Like, but I had to take that gamble to win. You have to almost do that because I needed to pick up a few. And I missed some big ones that morning. You had to pick up a few, like you're saying, in the morning on that top water. Those are just bonus fish.
Yep.
And then every year in the Susquehanna, I catch, I'd say 1 or 2 bonus fish where you see him chasing bait. All of a sudden you just throw over there because he's in a serious feeding mode and you catch that fish because he's aggressive. Champlain, that happened to me as well, several fish. So, you know, a lot of times you win a tournament, you get a couple of fish that are bonuses you weren't expecting, and then you go to the stuff you are expecting and just continue to compound in a good way. So, you know, but no one was up there. Really seems like too much once the sun was up high, and of course they weren't doing the same thing you were. So it worked out great for you. Now, what percentage of the time, Nolan, were you throwing the bug just without sighting the fish, and what percentage was it you were only picking it up if you saw one? Like, were you just kind of randomly throwing it without actually seeing them too?
So the only place I was really throwing it at random was that little spot I told you about in the morning they'd be in. That was really shallow because it was a very small spot that it was like maybe the size of a truck.
And you knew they were there.
Half the water. I knew that, like, for whatever reason, and it really didn't seem that much different than everywhere else. I mean, there was a ledge adjacent to it, so I guess maybe those were fish that would go out there during the day, but first thing in the morning they wanted to be up eating. But yeah, I would throw it there. And then besides that, once that sun got up, I knew that it was a better use of my time to just be looking. And if I didn't see the fish, a lot of the time I wouldn't throw it. Maybe I'd see a cool boulder that looked like it could hold one. And just since I'm already passing through, I'm going to throw to it. But the nice ones that I was catching, it was never a surprise. It was like, oh, there he is.
You're Florida red fishing, not Louisiana red fishing.
Yeah.
At that point.
We were just looking in the Outer Banks and Clearwater too. And honestly, the only thing I would compare what I was doing with that bug, closest thing I've done to that was this summer. I was sight fishing sheephead with weightless fiddler crabs, and they're like very, very skittish, and you have to throw way out in front of them. And a fiddler crab with no weight doesn't weigh anything. And I was throwing it on the same medium light spinning rod. Like, that's the only thing I've ever done that's comparable. And then when you hook them, you actually, instead of trying to fight it to the boat, you just kind of like chase him. Because it's like 1.5 feet of water, and it's a way better to not pull on that fish as hard. And you just follow him around until he starts to, you know, try to jump or shake his head, and then you can get him in the net. It's not like he can go anywhere. That's what I was doing with all the smallmouth. I literally, like, you'll see it in the video, I would hook them and then just start running around after them with the kayak behind me.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. It's such a fun fight. The other thing to think about too, that the sun's in the southern hemisphere, and Florida Keys sight fishing for me taught me a lot of things about shallow, clear water fishing for permit, throwing a little crab like that. And you've got going upstream, the way that river's going north to south, going upstream, you've got more sun coming back that direction. It's a little bit more at your back. So you had a better angle on the fish with the sun on top of everything else you had going for you. And so this is a really cool story. Last little bit of juice I will say, if you do find them, guys, if you're listening to this and you ever run across a big school like I did, the main thing you don't want to do is throw in the middle and bust them all up, because what I had to do, it's kind of like what Nolan was saying earlier. I had to make a cast that was like 10, 15 feet on the outside of this. Imagine my fish all in a big 75-yard circle, huge radius, of just tons of them. I had to throw on the outside about 10 feet, 15 feet, and pull about 3 or 4 of them to my jig and crawl. And then when I did that, it didn't blow up the whole school. And those 3 or 4 got a little competitive, and I would just twitch that crawl and they would eat it. And then I could keep working my way around that entire circle and keep pulling off fish that hadn't been spooked yet, haven't seen the bait. And I ended up catching about 20 out of that school of maybe 75 to 100. I wish I had a drone. I really wish I had a drone, but anyway, you just want to make sure you maximize that school as much as possible. And if I had some more finessey stuff for this fly, this gizmo, there's no telling how many I probably could have picked off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good bait.
Yeah.
I have one thing I noticed. I'm curious if you guys kind of notice the same, and I'm curious if you have a theory as to why or whatever. Because obviously, I fished rivers, right? But like a St. Lawrence River is completely different, I think, in terms of the Susquehanna River. Maybe not in how entirely they set up, but maybe in how they behave. But one thing I noticed is my biggest bites, at least on topwater in the morning, were not at your eddies or your ledges, but in between, like almost like your random rogues.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you guys noticed that, and then 2, if you have a theory behind it.
I just think big smallmouth are lazy. Big river smallmouth, like, yeah, smallmouth, he can be mean and get up in the current, but in the summertime, I think because I've fished tons of rivers growing up around me. Usually when you catch a bigger smallmouth, he's not in the riffle. You'll catch a 15, 16 incher. You might catch 10 of them in a riffle, but if you're going to catch a big one, he's usually somewhere that has current, but it's flat water. Steady current, but flat water, or slow current, but it's flat
Bubble
water.
trail, like that
Yeah,
little bubble trail stuff.
It's usually not, they're usually not in your fastest current. And for me, what was the best part of the pools I was fishing, because the pools, I mean, they might be like a quarter mile long on the Susquehanna when you had a little more depth to it. Just anywhere that you could pedal, that, that's what I'm considering a pool. If you could pedal, it was a pool, because there was not much water in the river. Usually like the back third, like where they would sit, it would be, say this thing starts to kind of choke down at the end and the current kind of picks back up. They're going to be just in front of where that, like if there's a rock, that's kind of, you can see it's not a rock that's creating like a swirl. It's almost just like a little bubble, like a little wake that's staying constantly, because that rock is, they'll be sitting just in front of that. And again, it's not fast current. And a lot of times it'd even be slow current where you catch them, but just flat water. And I just think it's that the bigger smallmouth, they're just lazy, and they're, if there's food everywhere on the Susquehanna, so it's not like they have to be in a riffle to be around the food. And if they can be around the food and not have to work as hard, I think that's why they're, setting up in the places they are. And I think it's nice, because most people, you're very attracted to the riffles. Like I saw guys that would get on a ledge that's got water swirling around it. I wasn't even catching anything on those things. I don't know if y'all were, like, you'd catch a couple little ones, but I felt like I should have been able to link a Ned rig into that stuff, and you should have been able to catch one on every freaking cast, but you wouldn't catch that many. And then in the tournament, I'm watching guys like camp on those spots while I'm murdering the fish 200 yards away, thinking like, I don't want to be fishing up there. And they're just, I'm like having my way with these fish over here, and everybo's focused on these beautiful rapids, and like there's no fish there. I couldn't figure it out. It was awesome.
We're saying way too much here.
That's
no
fine.
one's right.
People want to know.
When I was with Nick Robinson, who had big fish on day one. I've kind of been coaching him, a good friend of mine, and become a good friend. He just hired me to be a coach for kayak fishing because he wants to kind of do it more as he retires down the road. But anyway, I was teaching him about that. I said, Nick, they're in these nondescript areas, is what we call them. That's what they're in. The nondescript areas, it's slower moving. I think it's a couple things like another thing he said, earlier we talked about, I think it's also, that's the best place for them to eat these bugs, because it's calm. It's slower and they don't have to use a lot of energy, but also it's calm. So there's nothing on the surface riffling where they can get these bugs that they seem to just prefer and enjoy this time of year. And then the other thing I was going to say is, like you said, when you do catch the big ones that are in that swifter kind of in the shoals and the rapids, it's usually in the spring. They're feeding up heavy on some other kind of bait in the spring, but really a lot of times they're in the more of the, when it starts a big rapid or big, tail out portion, they're not always right up in that pool where you would expect a fish to be. A lot of times they're actually further, you actually can throw up in the rapid. And as your bait comes down, right when it starts to begin to like peter out and not be such a hard flowing rapid, they're kind of like down below, because the rapids are obviously going over shallow water. So that current's ripping, even when it passes over the rocks that are shallow, creating the rapid, that water's still moving fast on the surface. And the further away you get from that rapid, it's obviously even calmer down under there. And they're just looking up, sitting still, being lazy, like you're saying, Nolan, in calm water, even though our eyes see fast water, but they're down in the calm looking up. Striper will get like that too. But anyway, that's where your bigger smallies do tend to come from. But it's just awesome the way it works, because it's not the obvious stuff. And that's what I love about bass fishing. If it was so obvious, it'd be easy. We would all just go out there and visually just crush. But that little separator of a 15-inch fish to a 17 or 18, 19, 20, that's the stuff you got to learn and you got to know. And that's what wins tournaments. And I always use the stupid analogy. There's a reason why Olympic swimmers started shaving their hair on their bodies to gain 0.3 seconds in their entire race, because that's the difference at this level it takes. And Nolan, better than anyone else, you've been in the opens with all those boats. It takes you shaving all the hair on your body to gain that extra something to win. And
do you shave your legs?
Mike's gonna shave his body for the opens now. I hope he does. Mike, that might help you out.
There you go.
No, there's an interesting point though, Nolan, when you mentioned that back third, like for those bigger bites. So there was one system that on a float that had basically 3 sets of eddies. Like you have your one that was like the biggest, like most visual. Second one was a little bit more subtle, and the third one was the most subtle. And that's where I got all of my good bites on. And fun fact, that's actually where I lost my Fenwick Abu combo that your brother found for me. And later told me that's where he was getting, that's where he was getting all of his bites. So I learned, shit, I mean, I'm screwed. Ewing's fishing this. And I was like, going back to our point of like not getting in the way of somebody in contention, you know, for a quick lesson for folks, like I talked to Ewing day 2 and told him, like, if you see me around or if there's something I want me to avoid, because, like, look, like I was in contention to catch a check, but he was in contention to win. It is ethically my duty. I shouldn't say duty, but, like, it's the right decision, I should say, in the sport where I should bow out to Ewing in that position, say, if he were to see me. But once I learned that he found my rod, where I realized I lost my rod going through GoPro footage, I was like, oh, damn, you and I are sharing this area. And that's where he – you know, I went through and I caught my day 2 limit basically right there. And he goes through and later tells me he caught an even bigger bag of smallmouth that I never saw. And I just chalked it up to he's way better than I am. So it was like one of those things where I'm just glad to get my rod back. So huge shout out to Ewing for finding that. But like it further proves that point of like that back third. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of freaking me out because me and him call each other, you know, because we're allowed to call each other during the Hobie series. You can talk to people on the water. It's great. So I was talking to him on day 2 and I was kind of freaked out because first thing in the morning, he'd like call me up and the whole time while we're having a conversation, he's just fishing his Chapo. He's like, oh my gosh, that one's behind it. Oh, like and I'm like, dude, do you need to like get off the phone so you can focus? Like, is this all right? He's like, no, man, a lot of them are missing the bait. And that's just part of fishing that bait early in the morning is that you're not going to trick all of them, but it's such a good way to catch a big one that you just got to commit to it and know that if you're doing it right, you're just going to be having fish miss the bait and slap at the bait. That's just part of it. But yeah, I think he was around more fish than I was, to be completely honest. I think my area just set up to where I could stay there. And he had to, you know, continue floating through. He couldn't just sit there and be like, all right, well, I'll fish for these ones for an hour and then I'll go to the other ones. You know, his spots were spread out. He was around a lot of fish. That's what I know. And I know on day 2, at one point, like later in the afternoon, it was when he was still in third and I was in the lead and Jake Harshman was between us. I'm on the phone with him and he's like, he throws the bug out somewhere and he sees a great big one get under it and he's like freaking out and it finally eats it. And he catches it and it's 20-incher. And I'm like, heck yeah, dude. Because I knew that put him above Harshman. But like there was still like 2 hours left to fish. And I'm like, hope he didn't catch too many more of those.
Yeah.
Why don't you slow down there, bud?
Yeah, I got to step on the gas.
That big. My biggest fish was a 19.5 that I caught right off the bat on day 1 on a Chapo.
Literally off the bat.
Yeah, it was like the first like 2 milliseconds of my day when I was fishing. But that's on the video. Yeah, y'all don't have to watch for very long if you want to see that one. I would be curious going back in the future because, you know, people are always afraid to give up their stuff in a tournament. I'm trying to look at the big picture and know that people are going to like it a lot more if I talk about this stuff and hopefully, you know, would want to keep up with me instead of if I'm holding out for hoping that someday in the future I manage to make it back to the Susquehanna, it's just as low. We're there at the same time. And somehow, you know, because this is a very specific niche bait. It's not going to always work. If it would have been cloudy, we probably wouldn't have caught them very good on it, but we just got lucky and had some sun. But I would be really curious to see what the rest of the river, you know, had I spent more time on it. Because if I go back now, I probably wouldn't go to my same area very much. I would just be looking new stuff. And I'm sure there's other stuff out there to be unlocked still with it. And I'm like, man, if we go back in the future, like even because I'm telling you right now, with my YouTube video and the locals, like they're going to see the landmarks. There's obvious landmarks that I don't care. I'm just posting it because the fishing's cool and I'm not trying to hold anything back. People are going to know where it's at. But then that might be next time we go back, everybody's trying to go to where I caught them. Yeah, and then I go to explore somewhere else and I can make it work there. I mean, it's tournament fishing. You just got to, half of it's outsmarting the fishermen. That's, everybody knows that. But that's why Ewing and I were able to do so well this time is because you got to outsmart the fish, but also you got to be a step ahead of the next guy. So to me, part of tournament fishing is like when we go back, if we ever go back, I'm just going to have to adapt and, you know, do something else. It's the odds of you like going and doing the same thing again and like it all.
Dude, you had a Drew Cook.
But I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, you got a Drew Cook situation. I mean, it's only going to happen sight fishing for that many days on Santee Cooper in a row to win a tournament once every blue moon. And that's what I actually told that to somebody. I said, man, they had sun, they had no wind, they were biting the bugs. I'm telling you right now, that's what he did. I didn't know yet for sure. I said, you just made a comment. We had the smirk. You did something unique, different, and I knew it. I said, that's what it was. Once I'd found that school doing that, I knew. But you're right. You got to outsmart the fishermen. Sometimes people look at me and they, the stuff that I like to do, I'm known for getting into some pretty wild and crazy places. But then sometimes I go to places that are so obvious because I feel like everyone is now looking for the wild and crazy. And now it's like these obvious places are so overlooked. Sometimes you got to keep zigging and zagging. And it didn't work for me this time with Carl's bait and tackle sitting there, but you got to zig and zag a lot in this. And that actually brings the question I had for you, Nolan, because I almost can guarantee you had something happen to you, I'm sure, in the opens to miss the elites by 1 point. I'm sure there was something, somewhere where somebody had a boat draw that beat you to a spot or something like, and all that. You would think that something probably occurred like that. But I guess my question is, and I don't know if there is an answer to this, because we can't pick up and move 70 miles an hour. If you have a spot and you float down a river or you paddle on a lake and it's 2, 3, 4 miles away and you get there and a boat is there or another kayaker, you certainly need to have plan Bs and Cs and Ds. I always tell people in doing this tournament fishing thing, but don't you think that's probably one of the biggest differences in kayak fishing would be the challenge of, man, if that does happen and they're on a actual spot that's pretty small, not an area, you really gotta, all your chips are kind of in at that point. It's a challenge. I wasted 4 hours the entire tournament day and had to refine new stuff. So, but it's hard to pull the plug when you're going to waste that much time and it. But
yeah. So what I'll say is you have to approach it completely differently. Obviously, for me, when I'm fishing in a bass boat, I've always been like the run around like a chicken with my head cut off type fisherman. That's how I do the best, is just to hit as much high percentage stuff of whatever is high percentage for me at that time at that lake. It's very rare that I'll sit in a stretch and fish. Usually I may squeak by when I'm doing that, but I'm not going to be doing great doing that. But in a kayak tournament, you don't have the option to move around very much. So I like to look at it of, I want to find an area, and not only do I have to figure out that good pattern, but I got to figure out pattern B, pattern C, all within that area. So that if somebody is doing this and I wanted to be doing this, well, at least while he's right there, I'm going to go do this. So I had those topwater fish there first thing in the morning. Then I had my sight fishing stuff. There was a bridge that was stacked, but I knew those fish were probably going to get fished. Like I saw a pod of probably a dozen fish that were all 17 to 19 plus hanging out together on this bridge. And I threw the bug in there one time and I knew it was game over, but I also knew people were going to see them. And they got fished for so hard during practice and during the first day of the tournament. When I showed up there in tournament day, they were all gone. Probably just from being harassed. They probably didn't even get caught. They were just so tired of having baits thrown at them. But yeah, so I had that. And then also I knew that very last resort, there was a really long pool that didn't have a ton of fish, and it was big enough that the wind could blow in it, and then you can't see, but it had flats on either side, and the carp would go up to feed there. And if you found a smallmouth with a carp, I'm not talking about 5 carp with a smallmouth trailing behind him. I'm talking about 1 carp up there feeding, and there's a smallmouth with him like a stingray with a redfish on it. And he is with that carp, and he's waiting for that carp to chase something up. That was like my last ditch effort. That was like, well, if nothing else happens, I'll just go and look for those fish that follow those carp, because I know there's not going to be anybody doing that. And also it was a good way to catch a big one. That was actually my plan for if I had a good limit the first day. I was like, well, I'm just going to go up to that no man's land up there and just go hope I stumble across some big ones following the carp. And that's not that far off of what I actually ended up doing once I had caught, a bunch of fish. But yeah, mostly just having your area, and then you got to figure out how to catch all the fish in that area, not just the ones that are up feeding. You got to figure out the ones that are up feeding. You got to figure out the ones that are lazy and don't want to bite and are hanging out deeper. You got to figure out every single fish in that area, because there are way more bass in the areas we fish than we give credit for. Like, I've been in electro fishing boats before. There's a lot of bass in these places we catch them from. When you catch one bass there was probably 5 or 10, and so there's always another way to figure out how to catch them. And it's kind of cool with a kayak tournament. If I ended up going back to the opens, I think I would probably think about things a little differently now, just because knowing how to. It's not always about being there, like being in the best spot. It's like you just got to be there when it happens. You might be on those fish, and until they decide to do it, doesn't matter. But what I've found in a kayak is if you're stuck there, all of a sudden stuff starts happening for reasons that we don't understand, reasons that we cannot comprehend. Fish just all over the lake. It's these bite windows. Maybe it's stuff with the moon, the majors and the minors. That's a whole nother rabbit hole to dive down. But there's something out there that controls what makes the fish bite. And so as long as you are there when it happens, and I think a lot of times running around, the problem with that is that you might miss it because you're moving when it's happening. In a kayak, at least, you're there when it happens.
Makes sense.
It's true. What about the opens? Any other, you going to keep doing little kayaking and get back into boat stuff, or is this kayak stuff really enjoying this now?
No, I really love it. I love to compete. It honestly stresses me out really bad because I put so much pressure on myself because, I hate to be this guy. I still haven't bombed one. Legitimately, I have not bombed one before. And it has to happen at some point. So every time I'm like, this is it. It's coming. And so I got so much pressure on myself because, everybody just expects me to catch them. And I somehow usually will find a way. But people think I'm always on them. There's so many tournaments where I've had good finishes where it just flat out sucked. And I was stressing the whole time. And I caught 6 fish a day. And so right now what I'm trying to do is be smart with my money. The opens is a very terrible way. That is not a smart thing to do with your money. If you get in a point where you have the money that you can afford to lose and do it that way, there's some people that, right out of the gates when they're young, they have the support to be able to do that. If I was in their position, I'd probably do that. But for right now, it's not a good idea for me to do that. There may be a day in the future that's an option. For right now, I think YouTube seems like an avenue for me to potentially make money. So maybe one day down the road, that would be something that I could be doing. The kayak stuff is awesome because it's accessible to everybody. I love that because honestly, fishing at the opens level, yes, you're fishing against the best guys, but there's so many good fishermen out there that you're not even competing against because they can't do it. It's really just, it's a group of good fishermen, but it's also a group of good fishermen that just have weird scenarios in their lives that allow them to do it. There's so much more that happens than just being able to catch bass to be able to fish the open. It's insane that guys all have unique situations to where they somehow have the money and have the time, and that's very rare. But with the kayak stuff, it's really neat. It still requires time, but the financial side of it is a lot more affordable, and you can make money doing this. Even before this win, I have made money at every tournament, expenses included, which is crazy. That's insane. There's no BFL out there that you're going to do that in. I'm really excited with what the future holds for this. I hope that the younger people start to think the kayak fishing is cool because for some reason, since you're not going 70 miles an hour in a big sparkly boat, it's harder to get people to catch on to it. But I like fishing for fishing. I think fishing's awesome. I don't care if I'm on the bank. I don't care if I'm in a $120,000 boat. It's all cool. But for some people, I guess it is not the same way. But I'm hoping there's enough people out there that love fishing just for fishing that they will eventually start catching on, and this will gain more traction than it already is gaining.
Preach it, dude.
I agree. Definitely
I think that's a damn good way to wrap this sucker up because I don't know if my brain can fathom the amount of juice that y'all just laid out for us, but I think a lot of people are going to be like, holy crap. Yeah. But that was a heck of a lot of fun. But Nolan, for real, dude, congrats on 10 grand. Congrats on the win. You're basically already TOC qualified with your 3 finishes prior to that being all better than 20th. So I'd say you were in the TOC and now you are legitimately 100% without a doubt in the TOC. Yeah. So you are basically double qualified, and I'm looking forward to spending week and a half, whatever the heck it is, down Louisiana with you for TOC. And hopefully the guy up here in the top corner will stop getting his butt spanked by me in river fisheries. And we'll get,
you pay Carl to go there and follow me. That's what you
did. You're very well on the way I don't keep up with people enough to know what your other finishes are this year, but certainly 21st is definitely one of those three that'll go a long ways.
That'll be fun. I haven't fished a lot of them, honestly. But I mean, last year I was second heading into the TOC, and my little girl was born early, so I didn't get a chance to defend the AOY from 2020. And Ewing had unfortunate, I think he had 4 fish one day, and so I think he's fired up. You're fired up. I think I'm not going to be in the hunt for that, obviously, but I'm going to be at the TOC. I'm going to be at Wolf and Fox. I spent a little time doing the Bassmaster thing. I focused on the Bassmaster Kayak Series, and so I got 2 wins and a 7th over there. So I just need one good finish at Pickwick, and hopefully I can go get the AOY over there. But I'm going to try to be at the TOC. I think I'll make it with the Wolf and Fox plus Dardanelle, where I won in 2020. So I should be able to hopefully put together some good finishes and see you guys there. Maybe let's get a house together and just make it happen.
Hey, last thing, fishing online, Evergreen Gizmo. I don't think they have them right now, but I was talking to my buddy Seth who works there, and I asked him how many they had ordered, and he told me the number, and I said, you're going to need more because I know that you guys out there want this bait, and you can't just get one because, it's a fragile little bait. You got to get you a couple. So please go to fishing online, get those things. Color. If they're not there, maybe go get you like one from Tackle Direct or whatever, but just wait till you got to get 5 or 6. Get them from my buddies because that'll mean a lot to me.
For sure.
So,
hey, congrats again. Go ahead, Bailey.
Oh, go ahead, Drew. You're good.
I was just saying congrats. I haven't said congrats to you and to Ewing. Ewing is probably out there listening, or will maybe. Congrats, man, to you as well. I mean, that should not be overlooked. Just what an amazing finish he did. I know we talked about at the beginning. And to everybody that cash checks there, it's not easy to do, of course, top 10%. The other thing I'll say real quick is watch out for these guys because you guys are in a different time of your life than obviously I am with a couple young kids and wife and family. And that's what I think makes you guys so scary is that, you grew up in a generation where life scope was and all that stuff is kind of just, it just came about, but you get it. Like it's almost second nature for you guys. So, and you're pretty well versed in that too. I mean, as far as I know, right, Nolan? I mean, you're great.
Yeah, it's electronics too. Every fish I caught was on live scope, and I cashed a check there, so I feel pretty good about that stuff too.
That's right. That's
deep or that deep.
Right.
I got to stare at them on a screen. There's just bass. Got to catch them.
And that's where I think you guys are. Bailey, you're right. I'm including you. All these guys. You guys are super scary because you have the river fishing stuff, like you're saying. Which is kind of what I, love to do, obviously, and grew up doing. But the understanding of the electronics to go with it, and those are the anglers like the Polinics or the Wheelers, people that can do shallow and visual stuff, and also electronics. And the biggest key is know when to go where, when to do what. That's the hardest decision once you have all this technology because you know how to catch them shallow, you know how to catch them on electronics. But I just want to say a shout out to you guys that you guys are the next generation, the future of all this. And you're super scary. I mean, in such a good way that you know how to do all of the above. And so I just want to say congrats, keep it up. And us guys, with the kids and the families and all that, we're going to continue to do our best to try to fight back. But you guys are awesome. And I love watching it. I love seeing it. Keep doing the YouTube stuff. I'll try to send people your way. And man, I just am glad to see this sport's in good hands and where it's going with you guys.
Good deal.
Yep.
Appreciate that, Drew. Heck yeah. Well, guys, I'm seeing a lot of good feedback already in the comments from this show. So it sounds like, Nolan, I guess we're going to have to get you back on. I guess we're forced to get you back on the show a few more times. So hopefully we'll get you back on here.
He gives up juice.
That's right. I mean, we'll probably have to, we'll just substitute you. We'll never have, we'll never have Drew on ever again, and we'll just bring you on as substitute. I'm just kidding. All in good fun. But Drew, hang around here for a little second. Nolan, it's been a pleasure, buddy. Congratulations again. Looking forward to TOC. And are you fishing any more the rest of the year? Or are you waiting until November?
I think TOC is probably going to be next up for me because, like I said, I'm trying to get the YouTube thing going, and I got a big old chunk of time with a little more chunk of change in the bank account that I can try to invest into my YouTube. So I'm going to be probably doing some cool fishing stuff. Really, really excited. Don't know what it's going to be yet, but should be some good stuff coming down the pipe.
Hell yeah. And for folks, again, if you're listening or watching, go to the show notes. It's got the video. I'll add the video to the show description after this live show here. But also Nolan's Instagram and his YouTube channel are in the show notes as of right now. So get over there, subscribe, check out some of his videos, check out his new video that he just dropped literally 45 minutes ago.
I'm gonna watch it
Go
tonight.
check that out from the tournament video. I'm about to watch it after this episode.
Mostly Joppo fish. Day 2 is going to be bug fish. There's a couple bug fish in day 1 though. Don't worry.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. You got some
Bug bite
inside.
gets wild in day 2 though. So just so you know.
Nice.
Yeah, we're getting inside
Tease, the
scoop right now.
tease.
That's right. Well, Nolan, dude, thank you so much for joining in. Obviously, it's not gonna be the last time you're on this show, but appreciate you joining. And again, congrats, man.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one.
All right, boss.
Ya.
We'll talk to you. Dude, some damn juice.
Yeah, that was,
some
man.
damn juice. Like, holy crap.
Oh,
Unreal. Unreal.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
dude,
two
I
ways.
wanted-
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's two ways to go about it. You either give up all the juice because you're building that following, and then obviously you got to do other stuff to make money as an angler. You can't just fish tournaments. So you got to make a decision early on, and he's made that decision. I'm giving it all up. I'm recording it. I'm filming it, doing the YouTube thing. I'm gonna get paid more from sponsors because of the following. B, get paid by YouTube because of the views. That's his game plan, and he has made the right choice, in my opinion, because he has the time, given his life circumstances right now and his age and everything. He's got the time. That's the right decision. And don't worry about the fact that, somebody's going to see a spot, blow it up, whatever. If you're fishing at the highest level, I mean, look at the Elite Series, MLF, whatever, MPFL, the camera's on you live anyway. You're going to have to learn to deal with that. And if your mindset is, I'm good enough to be at that level, then, which I'm sure his mindset is, and I feel like he definitely, of course, is at that level, good enough to be there, you shouldn't worry about that and just go that route. So he's making the right decision. I'm on the other hand, I don't have time to do YouTube videos anymore and do all that stuff and getting paid by YouTube. So I'm kind of holding stuff a little closer to the vest because, when we go back to Champlain or wherever next year, I just want to keep going back to the same spots and trying to hoping they produce again. So, but
yeah, you're gonna go back in 3 years and those smallmouth will be like, damn, this guy again, he's back.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's made the right choice. But I do want to do lessons, and that's a little something that doesn't take as much time. And we talked about this offline, but I do want to do some lessons over the winter, kind of like Frank Scalish does with the locker room. Because I've already a couple of years ago I started that with Nick and a couple other guys actually I've done virtual lessons through like StreamYard or something like this. And we go over map study. We go over all the prep work, everything I do, river gauges, everything. And they get a chance. But I want to do it where maybe there's like 5 people that get on at one time. That way it's like a little class. And so that's my, I guess monetary version or stream. And it doesn't take as much time or, one of my streams. Obviously I work with Crescent full time, but on the tournament side of things, and it's just something I'm passionate about doing. So hopefully I can get that up and going. And I just enjoy it, man. Having people that you can pull for in other tournaments, like local guys or regional guys that aren't at this highest level of kayak fishing, getting them kind of well-versed and understanding it, and then following them in the tournament and cheering them on, it'd be pretty cool. So I'm going to kind of do something like that, and it takes way less time than filming it and putting it all together. But I still film it all, and I'll use that footage somewhere. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, what were you saying?
No, man, I'm just I'm pumped to have had you both on this show. I'm pumped to have, because like in talking to you guys, I mean, me, I'm not a river guy. That's just not where, I mean, I was brought up fishing small creeks for smallmouth, but I was like wade fishing a 1/4 mile stretch, and that's about it. Like, I'm a lake guy. That's how I am at heart. Like, I don't like to see the bank. I like to be, in 40 foot of water. I like to be using my electronics. So this was an event that I was super out of my comfort zone, but I fell in love with pretty fast. And it was one where I was pretty, I was pretty heartbroken with some of the events that happened, but I think that they were for the better because they're learning lessons now. But also at the same point in time, I'm pretty pumped to have somewhat kept up with the best in the business at this game, and walked away with a check and walked away. My biggest goal was to, 1, just learn, which I learned a lot, but 2, like to get rid of my 48th from Toledo Bend this earlier this year. And with the 17th, I mean, I'm sitting pretty good for AOI for my first year. And that was my goal, was to qualify on Angler of the Year points. And while I won Lake Eufaula, and that automatically qualified for me to fish the TOC. Part of me felt like that wasn't enough. Part of me felt like I need to qualify for AOI to be satisfied to be fishing this event, if that makes sense. Where it's like
right.
for an Elite Series event, unless you're fishing that last event, I don't think they have the rules still, but like it felt like if you fish an Elite Series event, we're going to talk theoretics here, okay?
Sure.
And I'm not saying I'm a Lee Livesey on fork, and Lee Livesey can easily qualify for Angler of the Year. Doesn't matter if it's north, south, east, west, whatever, okay? But I'm going to just use this as theoretics. Say you're Lee Livesey, you're on Lake Fork, not calling Eufaula my home lake, but wins an event that he's supposed to win or whichever. So I win an event that I'm not supposed to win, but I say I get lucky and win it. I don't feel satisfied with that qualifying for a championship event.
Right.
AOI to me
the
is
points,
much more meaningful to qualify versus winning or getting a top 3, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that for me, being able to have a first, a 12th, and a 17th automatically technically qualifies me through AOI to fish the TOC, double qualifying me, which for my first year, and I'm not trying to brag right now. That's not like me, but like it makes me feel damn good, dude. Like I'm pretty proud of it. I'll say it. I'll say it out loud. I'm pretty proud.
It's all, I mean, it's great, dude. I don't think you're, bragging or whatnot. This is your platform, man. It's for you to kind of share how you feel, because I'm sure other people feel the same way. You know what I mean? Like if they win one and they get a 48th and then a 67th, like, yeah, they're in the TOC, but did they really have the consistency, to really feel like they belong there? And that's what you've accomplished. So I get it, man. And I'm going to be working on that too in the next 2 events. So I can't wait to try to do the same, man, but hopefully I can win one and get it out of the way. But I mean, I'm proud of you, dude, because you went out there, like you said, it's out of your comfort zone and it's not what you normally do. And you did hang, you even, lost fish that could have even had you even further up. So, I mean, it was a really great event for you. Right. And now you're starting to get, because Eufaula was a shallow fishery where you won shallow. It's not your comfort zone. You're starting to get good experience in areas that are not your comfort zone, which is what I was saying about, you guys, Nolan and Ewing and the younger, you included and all the rest of the younger guys. The electronics and offshore stuff is becoming like just second nature to you guys. And it's not for people in my generation. It's not, not really at all. I mean, and now you're learning the other stuff too. And it's just making you guys super dangerous. Now it's again about who can figure out when to go where and strategy why. When to go shallow. So I'm proud of you, man.
I appreciate it, buddy. And actually, fun fact, okay, the only tournament this year that I had graphs on my boat, my kayak, was Toledo Bend, and that's my worst finish. Eufaula, Chickamauga, and Susquehanna, I had no graphs, no electronics on my boat. While I will say electronics did play a big factor in Eufaula with my auto chart in practice, being able to custom map that area. Chickamauga was a Lake Master deal, more of a fish smart on my phone and being able to establish similar areas. But like Susquehanna was a straight up just find a stretch that had, I think, the most pools that were deepest and consistent and run them and just try them in practice and just kind of wing it. I think I was like, it's not exactly how I thought I'd qualify.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, like, it's not. It's crazy. That's what I love about the sport. You just don't ever know. Speaking of which, I forgot one little piece of juice about those areas, those pools. Okay. You want to know why? Another reason why they're there in the summer in those nondescript areas with the slow current. It's because, you guys saw how many crawfish were in there. When you're in those areas and the water's clear and low, you can see them all. I'm not saying there weren't just as many in those swift riffle in the more of the rapids and the riffles, but that is definitely more of their springtime haunts. Those big boulders create a solid current break where they can even be there in the winter because it's a solid current break. It's no matter how high the river gets and cold, it's still a calm spot that can be. But guess what? These little places we're catching them now, those calmer bubble trails, these slick, gravelly, kind of sandy and gravelly with the shells kind of bottoms. Guess what that looks like in the winter? the fall or basically when the winter, when it gets cold and the water gets high, there is no current break. There is nowhere for them to they cannot be there because there is no current break there. The water is just, the volume of water is just rushing through there. So guess what the prey in the area get? A reprieve. That's my theory on river fishing. The fish continue to move during the seasons, but those fish, those bait in that area, the hellgrammites, the crawfish and everything, major reprieve from any fish eating it, because the way their bodies work, they don't want to be over there in that current. There's no current breaks because their metabolisms aren't at the ability to do it and sustain it, cold-blooded or whatever. So that's why there's more forage there as well. Plus now there's no current this time of the year. So it's the best of both worlds. So anyway, and then of course they're going to chow down on that, and they're going to eat all those, not all of them. There's so many crawfish in Susquehanna, but they're going to eat a ton of that up, where there's not as many as, there were when we were looking at them. And then guess what? The bait in those other areas haven't been pressured as much in the time of year when they get back over there. It's kind of like they keep just, because nature needs a chance to build back up and reproduce. Same with all your bait fish and lakes and everything else. They need a chance to reproduce. Anyway, that I forgot to kind of mention that other theory I had on that, and we're going long now, so I'll shut up. But
no, you're good, dude. That was super interesting. That's actually a really good point. I didn't even think about that. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, they can't live there in the winter or spring when it's raging and their temperatures aren't up yet. But yeah, man, pumped to have a chance to talk about this with you guys, and I'm excited about Wolf and Fox. I can't wait. That's the next one. It's not very far down the road, so a couple weeks away. So
heck yeah.
I'm
pumped. Really fast before we sign off here, another quick thank you to Nolan for joining us tonight. Again, guys, if you're not following him on Instagram or follow or subscribe to his YouTube channel, all of that is in the show notes. You guys can go check that out and watch his new video. Also, really quick, if you are into custom bait making and you want to get into custom bait making, we're talking earlier this show about tinkering, doing things that people aren't doing. You have to check out Do It Molds, especially with their new Katana Craw and the new Beetle. It is freaking sick. I just got the molds in. Andy and I are going to be pouring them up, making some of our own custom jig trailers and Texas rigs and all that jazz, and making some video content around it. And then last but not least, in stride with Nolan's new video, I will have 2 new episodes of Chasing Hardware coming out for you guys. I'm finally home. Computer issues have been fixed. We got a whole new MacBook and everything. And while I'm learning new editing software, I will get these videos out. We have a tournament video to get out for you guys, and then we'll get the Chasing Hardware videos out. But I have finally some time off here. I'm going to Wisconsin next week, but I will have time to edit while I'm in Wisconsin. So I'm going to start trying to the goal is to try to get at least 1 video a week the next coming weeks out for you guys, if not 2, if possible. But as always, I appreciate you all. Every week you guys join in, whether it's Andy holding down the fort, me here, or Andy and I both. Hopefully now we're going to have Andy and I both here for a couple months until we get to the TOC, and then it's going to be a little haywire for a couple weeks. But Drew, man, I appreciate you joining in. Anything the folks should know before we sign off?
That's it, man. You guys go watch that Chasing Hardware. It's awesome. You're doing a great job. So I enjoy watching it. So keep it up, man. I'm excited to see how it all turns out the rest of the year. So
heck yeah.
It's going to be a fun one, man. We're all in the hunt for a lot of stuff, dude.
That's right. I'm
on the Bassmaster side a little bit more than the Hobie at the moment, but following you guys and the AOI hunt and the TOC, it's all going to come down to the KBF NC still in play here later this year. So it's going to be a great finish to the season. And I just want to thank everyone for watching. If you guys want to follow along with me, I'm just, Drew Gregory Fishing everywhere. But yeah, enjoyed it, man. Let's do it again soon.
Heck yeah. Well, y'all see Drew on the next Chasing Hardwares, me talking mad crap to Drew. That was a fun time at the house last week, buddy.
Shout out to all the guys at the Airbnb. Shout out. Good times there.
But all right, folks. Appreciate y'all, and we'll see you guys on Friday.